name is Lindy Cowling and welcome to my channel. My website is www.lindycowling.co.uk. Email is info@lindycowling.co.uk. This is an experiential and humanitarian channel. Experiential in that what I speak about I have either directly experienced, I have direct input in that, direct experience on that, coming from higher self on that, or I've worked with that with my clients, but usually it's also me that has gone through the process that I talk about. But this is a channel with kind of no limitations, that is always expanding as I'm always expanding, and so I don't plan really from one week to the next what I'm going to talk about. Having said that, I have many videos, titles swimming around in my head, and like I said before, I could be on here, 2 or 3 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I'm just picking and choosing at the moment which ones I'm bringing out when. Before I launch into this, I'd just like to say also that I'm receiving an awful lot of emails at the moment from people asking general questions, which I don't have the facility to answer. I don't have the time nor the energy available to answer those. And so you will get an automated response saying that, but if you'd like to book in for a session, you're welcome. Also, when people have had readings, I'm tending to get a spate of people then about a week later coming back with, oh, can I ask you this or can I ask you that? And of course, once the reading's done, it's done. I can't go back over that and revisit that, because otherwise it's like me sitting down and tuning in again and doing another reading. And also on social media, I don't have the facility to keep having one-to-one responses and conversations with people on social media. All bookings for my sessions and appointments do go through my email and my website, please. I'm not being funny with that, but I'm one person, so I have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of hours, and if I was to answer all of those things I just listed, I'd be doing that 24 hours a day. So that's the way I have to have some boundaries in place. So having said that, I want to launch into this video now, which I'm quite excited about. And this video is called Soul Shock. So what do I mean by soul shock? This is when you have been or are in a situation that you have been connected into and linked into fully on the level of the soul. So this would be like a soul connection, like a soulmate. This would be old school, genuine twin flame union that has wrenched away or broken away. This could be a catalyst, any form of catalyst, dark catalyst, light catalyst. The point I'm making is it's an experience or a connection that you connected with at soul level. So before I launch in, let me differentiate between soul shock and the kind of grief that goes with that, and, well, the only other word I can use is more conventional grief. So grief is, a really powerful and very painful process, whatever you're grieving for, whoever you're grieving for. There's a difference between, and I'm not saying that they're different, so I'm not saying that one is worse than another, but it's a different kind of shock to the system, a different kind of grief when you're experiencing it through the soul. Now, let me explain that a little bit deeper. I'm not meaning to say if you lose someone that isn't soul family, or you lose a situation that isn't soul family in any way through natural means or through parting, and it can be a situation not necessarily relationship orientated. I'm not saying that that's less than soul shock. I'm saying it's slightly different, the way it affects you. Now, again, I'm going to repeat, this is an experiential and humanitarian channel, and I'm only talking about what I'm talking about because I have experienced a lot of grief and a lot of loss in my life, and I've experienced soul shock, and I've experienced other forms of grief, other forms of loss that play out through the system in a different way. It plays out in a different way according to at what level in connection in soul and spirit you were connected to the situation, to the events, to the person, to the connection, to the twin flame, to the catalyst, to the soulmate, whatever label we want to put on it. It really depends on what level of consciousness you were connected in at as to how it impacts on you. I've touched upon this about a year and a half ago, I think, in one video I brought out. I think I called it Cycle of Suffering, another one I called The Loss, but I've never actually brought one out on actually soul shock before. In situations I've been in, the most powerful and yet the most distressing forms of spiritual growth for me have been through, always through soul, soul related stuff, soul related people, really, really powerful ones. Now, not everyone reacts the same way. It really does depend on your personal makeup. It depends on what you came in to experience. It depends on your timeline. It depends on your personality. It depends on your childhood. It depends on so many different things, original, what they call core wounds, or original stuff in there. A lot of things can vary here. What I can say is the experiences I've had in regards to the soul have always been whopping great experiences. They've always been really big, powerful ones on different levels. And the reason I'm saying this is so that you understand, and I'm not just, yada yada, spieling off stuff. I'm talking from the experience I've had and what I see other people go through with soul shock. So it's not saying that grief when you lose somebody that isn't related to the soul is less than. I'm saying there's a slight difference. So I want to point that out first, because I'm not, not saying that, so I want to try and get that across. So soul shock, when you have connected with a situation, an experience, a course of events, a sequence of events, with a person, with a twin flame, with a soulmate, with a catalyst, whatever label you want to put on it, when you've connected in at a certain level, what happens is when that experience or that situation is either temporarily, let's call it over, in the physical sense of the word, i.e. that person has left the scene, you have left the scene, you're no longer in that situation, you're no longer doing that physical dance. Sometimes the situations have come down because they've come to a close, they can't go any further for all the reasons I've discussed over the last 130 videos, whatever it is, however many it is, and a myriad of reasons again. But when there's been a parting of the catalyst, the twin flame, the soulmate, or the situation, the life event that you were in, and it's impacted on that level, what happens is it sets off, which is why it's so traumatic and distressing. It sets off a sound like, I think I've tried to describe it before, like I align it to like a whale or a dolphin putting out a pitch, as if that dolphin or whale was beached, sending out a sound of distress. But also I can align this and say it's a bit like a tuning fork, because it's all tied in with sound. And when you have danced that dance in a connection for however long, and then there's a sudden, not a natural part of the process where there's a stepping back and this going on, but when there's been a catastrophic, almost like ripping apart, something has happened overnight, pretty dramatic. I could use, for example, like a disruptor intervening or something. It won't just be that, it's just the first one that came to my mind because that's what happened with me. what happens is the soul, which has by this point, or may not always have merged with the other person. I mean, if you're soulmates, there won't be a soul merge, but it's not. It's still not any less painful. From twin flame point of view, almost certainly there would be some kind, on some level, of merging have gone on with the energy bodies, or physically, or all of those things. Certainly it was all of those things with me. When there's a sudden ripping apart, there's like a tuning fork that had been in resonance or in harmony. Suddenly the whole lot, it goes like that, out of sync, and it's almost, I feel, the way to explain it is like something slips, and it's like it knocks the energy bodies actually out of line. You go out of alignment, and it sets off a sound. And I know from having gone through this that the sound, I can't even articulate it, but it was it was horrific, because I'm clairaudient, and I've been on every level with a twin flame, old school twin flame union, for 3.5 years, around them, week in, week out, every sense of the word. There was this horrific sound, and it wasn't like, I can't even articulate it, but the nearest I can come to explaining it, the way I felt it at the time, was the soul screaming, really, but it wasn't a screaming sound. It was a pitch that was actually driving me nuts after a while. It went on and on, week in, week out. And the thing is, why I find it really interesting, is other people could hear it. If there were, especially if there were mediums or psychics around me, they could hear it. And it would actually, they would have like a pounding headache, and it was actually driving them nuts being around me in it, because it was a terrible, terrible sound. I've never experienced anything like it, and I've experienced loss. I've lost people that I've dearly loved in really big, powerful circumstances before in my history in this timeline. And those losses have knocked me sideways physically, you know, in a real state for a long time before I've come out the other side. But none of them had that sound, because of course they were soul family, and I was interacting with them. So when I experienced it, it was massive, and it was powerful, and it was life-changing, but I wasn't at a level of consciousness that I was at when I experienced that wrenching away and this soul shock, which was, like I say, a sound I'd never heard before. It didn't go on for a few hours or a few days. This went on for months. It was absolutely excruciating. If it had gone on much longer, I don't think I could have, you know, bared it, really. I couldn't. It was just too much to bear, really. It was the passage of time, actually, and various things that got me through that, you know, healing from people, the passage of time, talking it through. It was a combination of things. There wasn't one thing. I did have some massive shamanic work done on me by a shaman from America that was over here anyway, a friend of a friend, which was hugely powerful to try and help. And all those things did help. It was a combination of things in kind of me getting through that period of time. But when soul shock, it hits in, not everybody's going to hear that sound. I mean, the sound reverberates out through the soul. They may not consciously hear it, because they might not be clairaudient. But it was, the whole system just goes like if someone was running their nails down a window or something, and the whole system goes into a state of like this, and it's, you know, not everybody is going to experience it that way. But then you have the emotional side of it, of course, the soul shock, which the only word I can use again repeatedly is shock. The whole system, the soul, the spirit, you as a human being go into a profound state of shock. And it's not an overnight thing. It can last for weeks, or, you know, running into months, where you're just really not sure which way is up. It's such a huge shock to the system, and what happens is it knocks the energy field sometimes out of alignment, all the energy bodies out of alignment, which again, you know, it's helpful if you get people to help with that. I mean, having gone through it, I didn't understand all of that at the time. I did as I come through the other end. But it's excruciating, and of course it will bring up on a soul level all the recorded history, even if you consciously can't remember it. It's just like being hit with a wall of sound, which if you're clairaudient you'll hear, but if you're not clairaudient you won't hear it. But people react to sound beyond the level of hearing all the time, which is why they can walk into a building and they feel all on edge there, and it's not necessarily because it's haunted. There's a certain pitch or a certain sound, you know, certain places you can go and you feel magical and wonderful, and often that's not just the ambience of the place, that's the sound the earth is making there, or the sound that spirit's making there. You know, there's a lot of things here, because the whole universe and everything is comprised of sound. So that even if you can't hear the sound, it's going out through the soul, and it really is astonishing. And it sets the whole system just like, you know, like rigid really. So you're going through the human grief, you know, the crying, the devastation, all that side of it. I'm saying this blasé here. You may not get hit in that way. I certainly got hit in that way. I can't imagine anything more powerful than that. And I thought I'd been through some powerful losses, but nothing like that. You know, when I'm saying this, it may not be as dramatic as that for you. It really depends on the circumstances. Mine was chopped overnight, which is like you know, just chopped. It wasn't a gradual, it was a like that. Which I personally feel was probably for my own well-being in the end there, because of the way it went and how dark it became in the end there because of what was involved. But even so, what it sets off in the system, like I say, is really can be very, very powerful. And it takes people a while to recover from that. And it's hard for me to say how long, because it depends on you. You know, you uniquely as you are, how long that takes. And I can't say all one thing helps. It's a passage of time and a combination of things. It depends on how involved you were with that connection, what purpose it served, if they're still in your life, if they're not in your life, if it's chopped overnight. I mean, there's variations on a theme here. But they are, when we're talking about the soul, where there's recorded history of the soul, or awareness of the soul and spirit there, then it is excruciating. And you do go into a state of shock. I mean, I can't really, it's a bit of a blur to me now, really. I would personally say, I mean, I'm me, and I came from a very dramatic, traumatic background. You know, so I didn't have the emotional foundations there to cope with being hit with what I was being hit with. And so it did affect me very dramatically. I'm also empathic, all those things combined, and had been involved with, you know, narcissists with psychopathic tendencies scenario, and disruptor, and all that bloodline that went with it, and loads of other stuff which I won't go into here. So I am giving extreme examples, but what I can tell you is I've seen it in other people to lesser degrees. Some it has hit like that, and others to lesser degrees. It seems the more involved you were with that connection, the harder you'll hit. Like if you were around them for a long time, which I was, you know, intimate. You know, if you had left personal situations, you know, I'd come out of a 27-year marriage from mine, and I'd already turned my whole life around anyway, and all that going on at the same time. It really just does depend. But the more the deeper the level you're connected at soul, the more commonplace, should we say, is to experience it that way. So it's a different level of grieving. It's it's not less than or more than, it's different than. And it does set off, it's like the whole system just goes out of sync, just goes on high alert, red alert, the whole system just goes, because it's almost like the soul almost feels like it's been violated. It's like that really. I mean, just like a violation. The whole system. It's like a spiritual kind of, a soul kind of rape, a spiritual kind of rape. I don't mean rape in the sexual means of it, but it's like a violation really, because it's a merging has already taken place by then. If you are somebody that has experienced or is experiencing soul shock, you really got to be kind to yourself, and you've got to take one day at a time and get assistance for it. I can't tell you any one thing works. It's a combination of things. It depends really on you uniquely, your situation, how you are in personality, in soul, the purpose of it, how long it went on, how it went on. It's a combination of things that will help. I never found the answers all in one camp, and for me it became so severe, also because of my background, also because of the circumstances that I was involved in with the individual involved. I had to have 20, I repeat, 20 sessions for severe post-traumatic stress disorder on the NHS here. Eventually I realised this weren't going to go away. Now that was only one part of it. That's how it affected me mentally. I got spiritual help for it. I got healing for it. You had to cover a lot of bases depending on you, you know, your unique circumstances and your unique self. I had to have a number of different things in the end, you know, almost like to recover from that and then come fully through the other side of it. Well, the reason I'm bringing this out is because I haven't actually spoke about that, you know, calling it, I think I've referred to it over the last 2.5, 3 years, almost 3 years I think now, as I think I've said soul shock, you know, in several videos before you go into a state of shock, but I've never actually specifically spoke about it. If you are someone that's going through that or gone through that as well, I mean, like everything, I always put a positive spin on everything. When you come through the other side of it, which you will, when you come out the other side of it and you kind of heal and recover and everything from the front and come out the other side of it, you will be greater than you were when you went into it. You will be more than, and I know it's probably hard for you to kind of believe that or assimilate that at the moment, having even heard what I'm saying, and if you're going through it, you know how painful it can be, but you do come through the other side of it, and you do come through, if you know, more rounded than what you went in. You might need some assistance, not really to put you back together, but to reassemble things. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the point I will make is sometimes when something like that happens, you can go into such a state of shock that the consciousness of the soul, not all of it, doesn't leave you empty, but just ships out for a bit. Certainly the shamanic work I had done, and part of that was soul retrieval, where it was just so, I mean, I partially left the body really for a while. Yeah, I kind of had those abilities anyway, but sometimes this is where soul retrieval comes in, proper shamanic soul retrieval, where consciousness, the soul consciousness, soulless consciousness just ships out, you know, when a situation is so traumatic or painful, then part of that consciousness says, right, I'm off further on in the timeline, or I'm going to sit on the sidelines for a bit and then come back. And that would be, you know, again under the guise of someone who knows what they're doing, not just someone who's dipping their toe in the water, and someone who knows their stuff, that can, you know, assimilate that and call that back in and all the rest of it. So the reason I'm bringing this out really is as having personally experienced it and experienced other losses in my life which have been different, equally dramatic. I mean, very dramatic losses. You know, I had a connection with someone very early on in my life, when I was 17. I was with that person for years. It was quite a tumultuous, you know, soul family thing. Engaged, and they went missing overnight, and there is a interesting spin to that story. I always knew, in order for me to heal, I would just come round a corner one day and then there would be resolution. It was 18 months later, I was walking down a London street. I don't live in London. I wasn't meant, I was going to say I wasn't meant to be in London. Obviously I was. And I kept having a strong feeling I would meet this individual, and then I'm coming down a London street and there's this drunk tramp shuffling up the road towards me, and I just like freeze, again in a state of shock really. And it was this individual that had gone missing all that time ago without a word. And I'll cut a very long story short. There was huge resolution. We took him. I was with a group of people, sobered him up. He apologised for what had happened. He had had some form of breakdown. Ironically, his overnight departure had triggered me almost into a form of breakdown at that age. I didn't come from a stable childhood. Remember, I didn't have the emotional blocks in place. My father had tried to murder my mother. It was a very violent household I grew up into. All that was going on at the same time when my connection, soul family connection, basically disappeared overnight. I mean, in some ways you could say did a runner. It wasn't a runner. I'm not going to use that term. That brings me on to another video in a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, I'm using my only living example to show you. That was big. I mean, I was really in a muddle for quite a while after that. And then years later, another scenario, soul family, really big loss there again. Almost got a first base, but didn't quite. Just chopped, termination overnight after a 13-year. Not relationship in that sense, but in one another's lives, triggered me into real physical illness literally overnight, which I took really badly. The reason I'm using this as an example is to say they were big. I mean, they were life changers. They were all steps on the path to opening my heart. I didn't know that at the time. But the reason I'm using this is they were hugely painful, hugely transformative, a huge grief, loss, drama, all the rest of it. But they were all dramatic and had value in their own right, but it still didn't make the same sound as being ripped away from emerging on a soul and spiritual level with someone. So every kind of layer I went was different for different purposes and slightly higher and deeper than before. And I mean, I could say that about everyone that has their unique experiences. Unless they get stuck in a loop and keep repeating experiences, attracting in people that hammer home the same lessons time and time again. If you're continuing to move forward, you experience things on a different level until you don't need to experience it in that form again, that way again. So I use those examples so you recognise that although I was hit by a ton of bricks, and you might be hit by a ton of bricks, and it's big, and you can't imagine anything any bigger or worse than that, it's still not quite the same as when the soul goes into a state of shock. When the whole system, that energy field is knocked sideways, where the tuning fork pings suddenly and to the wrong, vibration suddenly, and it all goes out of whack. And whether you're aware consciously of that sound or not aware of it, you have to cut yourself slack when you're going through that period of time. If you're going through that period of time, I mean, I hope you never have to go through soul shock. Not everyone does. I mean, people can experience a parting of the ways with connections, and it never sets off soul shock. It sets off grief and all sorts of things like that, different levels of grief. But it might not set off a shock. It really depends if they emerged at that point, and like I say, in your individual makeup, your circumstances, what was involved, what wasn't involved. But it's a powerful thing, and don't be afraid to seek out assistance and give yourself time. It's like anything, any kind of grief and loss. It sounds really corny. People say, oh, it's going to take time and that's the last thing you want to hear when you're going through it. I mean, really, you just want anything to stop the agony, really. But it is true. I mean, it is true. It's a passage of time, and it will get a lot easier, and in the end it won't be there at all. You would have come back into a state of balance, all the energy fields, you know, you would have realigned mentally, emotionally, physically. You'd have moved through that, and then you move through the process, you know, you heal from it, and you move beyond that into your you know, higher self, really, your ultimate being, really, you in your ultimate form. I will love you and leave you. Gosh, this has been a long video. I didn't know it was going to be this long. I don't usually record this long, so it's going to take hours to upload. So this will probably be up over the weekend. So I hope that helps, really. It's just to confirm again that it's genuine, that it's a phenomena. Unless you've been through soul shock, you can't explain it to anyone really that hasn't. You can't, because they just don't get it. And then people will just won't get why it takes you 3 or 4 years to recover from something like that, or more, or depending on your personal circumstance and makeup, it might not take you as long as that. But people that won't understand why it's taken you longer than a normal breakup. It's like, you know, why is this taking so long, or why has it hit you like this, or why has it hit you like that? And that's why, because it's not on a conventional level of connection. When you're hit by soul shock, you've been interacting with this person in your spiritual field, in your soul energy, profoundly on those levels, which is why it can be it's painful. Sometimes it can be damaging. But, you know, again, if you take the bull by the horns and move through the process, ultimately, like I say about all of this, ultimately it leads you into your divinity, and it leads you into transformation. But those steps to transformation are one step at a time, you know, and you have to cut yourself some slack when you're going through this. And like I always say, you get the appropriate assistance you need at the time. I don't know anyone that manages to go through something like that completely on their own, because it's overwhelming. So get the assistance that you need, take your time, and know that, as with all things, it will pass, and it will get so much easier as you move through it and transform. I will love you and leave you. Sorry, this video has gone on so long. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. I do appreciate the subscribers to my channel. I do appreciate the views, you know, the viewing to my channel. And I will continue to make videos until the day comes when I don't wish to do that anymore, and I don't feel there's any value in me doing that anymore, and I don't enjoy it anymore, and other people don't resonate or enjoy them, and then I'll go do something else. But until then, I'll see you again soon, probably, because I've got about 6 titles whizzing around my head, so much I want to talk about. But I will love you and leave you for now. Bye bye, guys. Take care.